Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the April 2021 meeting of the Washington County Finance and Budget Committee meeting to order. I have asked JP Sean Simons to do the prayer and pledge. Thank you, JP Simons. Are there any updates to the agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda. I have a motion to approve the agenda by JP Johnson.
Second.
Second by JP Washington. All those in favor?
Aye.
The agenda is approved. Before we get into our reports this evening, Judge Wood is with us this evening and he would like to open with a few comments.
Here we go. Good evening, and thank you, Chairman Deaconess, for having me and allowing me to make a couple of comments. Two things I just want to share tonight. One, last week, Governor Hutchinson called and said, "Hey, I made my appointment. It will be Bill Ussery." And so I was able to administer the oath of office to him today. So Bill Ussery will be coming back, joining the County Quorum Court. So again, welcome and congratulations. Bill has served, JP Ussery served, I think, 1, 2, 3 terms. He was out the last term. And so somewhat familiar with our grounds here and how we operate. And so again, we're glad to have you back. So again, guys, give him appreciation, reach out to him, and Miss Patty will have to get him updated on the systems and all. The second comment was in regards to the, I guess, the idea that I shared last week in a press release. I shared an idea that I'm, again, hearing a lot across the county, a lot from those in the cities, obviously, but in the unincorporated areas, as well as from the JPs and our elected officials. And so I had an idea and I put that out there, which was for our unincorporated, I hear a lot from them, which is very different than what I'm hearing, say, from the cities. Our unincorporated, they call about obviously roads and remote communication and how do we get better broadband and Wi-Fi. And so we're working on those things. Obviously, we're working on cell towers and radios and that type of thing, so we can connect and be connected with the rest of the world, if you will. But it's just different than the needs that I've been hearing in the cities, which again, centered around food or vaccination, that type of piece in small businesses. And so I put a idea out there that here's an idea. Let's look at not only saying on one hand, we had constituents say, no, let's not spend anything. On the other hand, it was spend everything. I think it's really right down the middle that we should spend what we need to spend and save what we can. And to put a matching was an idea that if there's a crisis or an emergency ordinance, if you will, that would say, if there's a crisis or a need in your particular city, you guys, the mayor, your council, put something together, pass your appropriation, and then bring that to the county for the county to possibly match it, especially if it's an emergency. And this was a stopgap idea until the cities receive their next iteration of funds from the federal government, which will probably be about 30 days from now. Again, I've spent a lot of time with the mayors, have not heard anything from them in the cities, but in our unincorporated, I hear from them all the time because they don't have a mayor or a city council. And so this was a way to kind of put something as a not possible idea out there. So again, I just want to make sure that one, and I've talked to a number of the JPs even after I did the press release, just to again kind of talk about some of that. But again, as far as how does that look, what shape, form, that would be really left to the JPs. I'm happy to any questions that the JPs may have in regard to the press release, or at least the idea that I had. But again, that's really in you guys' ballpark.
Are there any questions for Judge Wood? Keep in mind, we have a discussion item later in the
That's
agenda
right.
to discuss amongst ourselves, but I would like to take this opportunity to ask Judge Wood questions so he might be able to move on this evening. Justice Wilson?
Have we become aware of how the $46 million that the federal government is sending us is going to be encumbered? In other words,
Yeah,
what
it will be.
restrictions?
It will have some, it will be encumbered. It will have some what you can and what you cannot spend. They're still flushing out. A lot of it will be around COVID. So broadband communication, it will be around vaccination, distribution. It will have some other pieces. They're still flushing it out. Again, it's been fast. The latest is that it will probably not be the 46 that we were originally talking about. It will probably be half. So this is a way to kind of lessen the burden on the federal government, I guess, by distributing half of that. So we will probably see about 23 million of that. And then next year, they will release the next 23. And then the cities, same thing. I think Fayetteville and Springdale will receive about 20 million. So the odds are high, they'll probably receive about 10 million if they continue to run down the path that they are, which they've been discussing, which is to do about half. But it will come with, you can spend it on these things and not on anything else. But they're still flushing through what that looks like.
Thank you.
Any other questions from JPs? Okay,
Thanks again.
Judge Wood, we
letting me
appreciate
spend
you
some
coming
time
in
on
and
that.
taking the time this evening.
Welcome again, JP Ussery.
Yes, I would welcome JP Ussery to the group too. Welcome to the jungle. Okay, we'll move on with our monthly reports now. If first up is Treasurer Hill.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, this is not that.
Oh, not that? Okay, never mind.
Treasurer Financial Summary 4.1. March is not a banner month for revenue, and if you look at general, you can see it was true again in 2021. 2.7 million in expenditures, just a little over $1 million in revenue. First time I've ever had to use my readers at a meeting. But we ended the month over 10 million in the general fund. Road and jail both did well. They want to draw your attention to 1825 and 3516. The 1825 replaces 3516. 3516 is grant number, and these are earmarked donations for the animal shelter. So they're not really supposed to be in the grants. So I moved them to a different fund number. See at the bottom of page 5 or the top of page 5, we ended the month with 52.2 million in the bank. 4.2, that's a 1 cent sales tax. Excellent month. One of the biggest I've seen, 15.86% over 2020. Almost $100,000 over last year at this same time. For the year, we're a little over 10% above 2020. 4.3, the jail tax, same percentage. For the year, we're already almost 300,000 above the same period last year. Same, a little over 10% for the year. 4.4, the local sales tax distribution, Like I said, I just picked these out because that's familiar to most people. There's almost like, I think probably 200, over 200 categories of these taxes. But percentage wise, the biggest one, no surprise, of the e-shopping. We only had one negative this month in the ones that I picked, and that was full service restaurants. Hopefully they'll get back in business pretty soon. And finally, 4.6, the quarter-cent radio system sales tax. First time it's been under $1 million, but for March, that's an excellent number. 7 months in, 5 to go. These are, Patty, can you go back to 4.2? These are January collections that we get in March. And usually if the census had been on schedule, this would be the month that we'd see the big decline from the new sales tax. But since it's been delayed, I guess it's good news for the county that we keep getting our regular collections until that does become official. And I've heard September, I've heard other months, but I'm just not sure yet. And that's all I have on this segment.
Thank you, Treasurer Hill. Are there any questions for Treasurer Hill? JP Essery?
Thank you. What will be the effective date once the census is finally done?
It'll be, say it becomes official September. We should get the first collections in November. It'll be 2 months ahead of whenever the official date is.
JP Wilson?
That was my question as well. If we were going to have to reserve something in between, or if that was the case.
My
And he's
projections
answered it.
this year was for it to hit right now. And so my projection should be a little better than what I showed.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you, Treasurer Hill.
Thank you.
Next up is the employee insurances report from Mr. Driver. Mr. Driver on the Zoom call. Yep, okay. Mr. Driver, can you hear us? Our feedback screen up here says he's on there twice. Okay, just making sure you guys saw that too. Mr. Driver, can you hear us? Yeah, and Mr. Driver, if you could log out, maybe come back in, that might help us out a little bit. Until then, Comptroller Worthen, will you step in and help us out a little bit on your report?
Okay, 6.1 is the summary statement of operations, expenses by fund and department. For 3 months in, if expenses are linear, we should be at about 25%, but departments are rarely linear, but gives us a rough idea. And On page 13, general is at 22.6%. Then all the other departments are pretty well self-explanatory. And then over on page 17, all departments combined are at 20.2%. And then 6.2 is the unappropriated reserve balance report. And the ordinances that affected two funds for last month, the general fund and the coronavirus relief fund. And ended up with net general after the deduction for the allowance for the jail, it is $5,232,153. Yeah. That's all I had.
Any questions for Comptroller Worthen? Thank you, sir. It doesn't look like we're having any additional luck with Mr. Driver. In the interest of time, I would request that Mr. Driver maybe send us a report via email and you guys can follow up as needed. We're going to move on to new business. The first item in the new business is I have invited Treasurer Hill to give us kind of the overview of the budgeting process from his perspective. And this is an opportunity for us on the court to refresh new members to learn maybe something from his expertise. And then we're at the end of it, we're going to have a little bit of time for some Q&A. So Treasurer Hill, if you will.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, that insurance report was a good report. It was, I think we began the month at 3.2 and ended at 3.4. So employee insurance is doing well right now.
Okay, then you can control it right there.
All right. Revenue budget 101. There we go. 1,000 general, where we were, where we are. It's last dozen years or so. If you have a strong general fund, it makes the overall, the health of your financial situation so much better because it is unrestricted revenue. And you can, if you need to help funds out, you can help funds out, even though the other funds can't help the general fund out. But if you look at the graph there, our high water marks was 2010 and 2011, almost 27 million in the general fund alone. Then you see the pretty steep decline. And down at the bottom gives you some of the reasons. We had, like we're fixing to have this year, we had the sales tax. The 2010 census sales tax was cut. We had general fund transfers, a lot of transfers to jail fund, and had a $500,000 reduction on the millage rate. So all those combined, plus we built the animal shelter during that time frame. So it's in pretty well free fall from 2010 to 2016 or so, and then you see it leveling out. And then at 2019, that $500,000 was put back on, and there you see it's starting to tick back up in 2020 going into this year. Top revenue streams in the three big funds: property tax, sales tax for the general fund, sales tax, state aid, property tax for the road, and sales tax and prisoner care for the jail fund. Sales tax in Washington County. Just went over those. The 1 cent countywide sales tax enacted in 1981. We do share this with the cities based on population. For example, when this first started, Washington County was at 31.64% of the total take. And now we're down to 18.39. So who knows what this is this is probably gonna take us, the 2020 census, I don't know, 15, 16%, maybe. We'll just have to wait and see on that. Of that 18.39%, it is split 60-40 between general and road. Quorum court can change this percentage or this split. It has a few times in the past, but overall, they've stuck with this 60-40 in most cases. And this tax brought in 5 million for general and 3.5 for road. And tell you how much we've grown. In 1982, this 1 cent brought in 5.6 million, and last year brought in 46.6 million. So that just floors me still. This 1 penny brings in that much money. But quarter-cent jail tax enacted in 2002. County jail gets 100% of this tax. The half-cent road tax enacted in 2013 started as a temporary tax, but as you know, it was voted in as a permanent tax. 70% of this tax goes to the state, 15 goes to the cities, and 15% goes to the counties. And that brought in about 1.8 million last year. And finally, the quarter-cent radio tax, that's a 1-year tax only, and it should bring in about 12 million. I wish I had the 2020 numbers, but so I went back to the 2010 census just to give you an idea of what this looks like. See, in 2010, you see a big dip to 2011. That's we lost about $1 million that first year. And then right away, you start seeing an increase. But if you look, it takes 5 to 6 years before you catch up to where you were before. And then hopefully you start growing again past that. Property taxes, Washington County. Millage rates currently at 4.4 for county general, maximum of 5. County road 1.1, maximum of 3 with quorum court approval. Again, they share this with the cities within their limits. Fayetteville and Springdale got special legislation to get 80% within their city limits. All the smaller cities, they get 50% of this millage rate. County library is currently at one mill. All library millage must be voted on by the public. This tax is countywide, except within the city limits of Fayetteville, since they have their own city library. Here you see all the millage breaks down from 1/10 of a mill all the way to 5 mills. If you look at that second column down to 0044, that's where the general fund is currently at. You notice we're not going to get this much in, 19,500,000. This is with 100% paying. Historically, we have about 92% that pay on time. And then also you have your homestead credit. That's deducted from this. We get it back through a sales tax, but that's a different revenue line item. So you have to deduct that from that. So probably around 16.2 million you could expect from that 4.4. At this, if you look at the very top, the 4.4 billion, that's the 20% assessed value of all of Washington County. That's a 2020 final number, will be collected this year. Calculating millage. Pretty much in a nutshell, per house is worth $100,000. 1 mil on that house would be $20. $200,000 house would be $40, so on. I live at Elkins, so I picked a $100,000 home at Elkins. Just to show you how it's figured, its assessed value is $20,000. Then you have your, of course, you can look all your millages, county millage, general 4.4, all the way down to the Elkins School is 44 mills, Elkins City 4.9, so forth. Total millage is 55.4. So you take that and multiply it by 20,000. 1,108, subtract your homestead credit. And you have to pay about 733 taxes, $733 in taxes on this house annually. These are the assessment values, last 20 years. I mean, we do live in the prosperous region of Arkansas. And this is what you would expect in that type of region. Substantial growth, robust area. It is a double-edged sword. I mean, you want your property values to be high when you sell, of course, but you also pay more taxes on those higher property values. Let's see. And finally, on the property tax, when it comes to me from the collector, this is where I send it. 80% goes to schools. We get about 8.75. That's not counting the county library. Between us and the road, about 8.75% of every dollar comes to the county. Budget process. Very simplistic. The treasurer does the revenue, elected officials, department heads prepare the budgets. Comptroller puts all these budgets together and prepares the personal services for each department. Quorum court examines and votes yes or no on its approval. Hope y'all can see that better than I can. It's kind of blurry, but this is just a sample of the revenue projections that you'll see probably, I guess, in June. I'm hoping they'll have numbers then, but anyway, the general fund has like 60 different revenue line items, revenue streams, and so forth and so on. But this will be a 3-page report. This is probably the page you'll see most of all during the budget process. Budget summary kind of ties it all together. The first column, 2022 projected revenue. That's what I believe will come in or roll over into the new year, minus all the prior year budget expenses. And the next column is just the new revenue that comes in during the calendar year. Add those together, you get your total revenue projections. We do have a 90% rule that's been on the book since I looked it up about 1879, that you can only budget 90% of the revenue. They do that for obvious reasons, to keep people from spending all their budget. There are exceptions, dedicated sales taxes like to the radio system, the jail, road. That does not have to be held back 10%. But after you hold that back, then you have a number that's available to budget. Then all us department heads and elected officials submit our budgets. That would be the requested budgets there. And anything left over is unappropriated reserves on your far right. The second from the right, general fund infusion. That's a lot of times the jail cannot make their budget based on the revenue that I expect them to receive. So like if it's $1 million short, in years past, we put $1 million up in the general fund infusion to make up for that, because we have to have a balanced budget. And how that works is sometimes jail just runs out of money. And I can't let that fund go in the red. So I need something to, because you can't just shut down the jail operations. I need something to pull that money just on a, it's still part of their budget. But, and I just use, like if I know sales tax is coming in next week, I'll just use as little as I can to get through until they get that next revenue bump. And this is the past about 10 years. Talked about the general transfers to jail just a second ago. You can tell from 2012 to 2015, jail was bleeding money pretty bad, and general was having to make up the difference. But since 2016, it's gotten a lot better, just I think 660,000. over the last 6 years. So it is getting better. And that was one of the reasons you could see a dip of the general fund, because it's having to send so much to the jail. This is a statement of operations. This is what elected officials, department heads look at. See that first blue column, original budget, that's what you approve. The amendment line, next line. Like if I needed, we can't transfer anything on personal services. So if I need, this is my treasurer's automation budget, by the way. So if I needed an extra 10,000 salary, which I don't, but if I did, I'd come to you for an appropriation ordinance. And then if it was approved, then you would see that $10,000 on that amendment. The other sections like supplies, we have the freedom to move some money around if we need it. And I would go in and do a line item transfer and it would show up on that amendment line too. That's just the back end of that report. A few graphs for you. This is total projected revenue versus total budgets the last 4 years. I mean, just looking at that, looks good. Revenue is way over expenditures. It's the way we want it. Available revenue with the 10% holdback, that cuts that revenue down just a little bit. Now you see it's kind of reversed. This is just new revenue versus the total budgets, projected new revenue, total budgets. You see the revenue lines are below the budgets. That is, you don't like to look at it and see that, but it's sort of by design, because my new revenue projections are going to be as, fairly conservative. Of course, the budgets are, they're told what they're wanting. And I'm trying to hedge my bets a little on the revenue. So I'm hoping that they don't spend all their budgets and my revenue comes in higher than what I say. And this next graph will show that's exactly what happens. See, through 2016 through 2019, they're almost even. So we are spending most of the new revenue that's coming in. So that hurts you trying to build your reserves, but it keeps you from also from getting into your reserves. 2020 is kind of an outlier because we had we had the radio tax that wasn't projected, and we had the CARES Act money that came in that wasn't projected. So that's the reason 2020 shows the revenue way up over actual expenditures. Finally, miscellaneous, gross payroll, including retirements, about 1.3 million a year. Every 2 weeks, personnel costs are about 50% of the annual budget, but not all budgets are created equal. Jail, 72% is personnel, sheriff, 90% is personnel. And my general fund is 100% personnel. So not all budgets are created equal that way. I mean, I think Attorney Lester mentioned some of the funds last month. The quorum court appropriates funds 1,000 through 5,000, fund 6,000 are agency funds. No appropriations are required. Those are mainly pass-through funds like cities and schools get their taxes, and I turn around and send them a check. 1,000 is general, 2,000 road, 3,000 special revenue. That includes things like jail, 911, your grants. And the 4,000 series capital projects, the only one we have is radio sales tax. And the 5,000 series debt service fund. We had one last year with the court costs and fines, but right now we do not have one. And finally, Washington County offices are audited each year, legislative audit. And that is that.
Thank you, Treasurer Hill. Any questions?
Y'all can call me anytime. Come see me,
Appreciate it.
whatever.
Yes. So we've had the revenue side as Treasurer Hill has laid out to us tonight. I'm going to invite Comptroller Worthen in May to kind of give us an expense side from his standpoint, and then also to go over some examples of the budget reports that we're going to see when they start being delivered, and maybe some tips on how to read those. So I appreciate you very much, Treasurer Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Moving on to item number 8, I have invited both the Fayetteville and Springdale housing authorities here this evening for what I hope is an informative meeting for us to understand how the disbursement of the rental grant assistant funds is going. And I've asked them to keep their presentations to around 15 minutes. We're going to have questions, we're going to have time afterwards for questions and answers. So I would ask the JPs to let the presenters get all the way through their presentations, and then we'll follow up with questions afterwards. But I believe we'll have the Fayetteville Housing Authority first. And once he gets you guys set up, if you'll go ahead and introduce yourselves, that would be great. Yeah.
Big chair.
Yeah.
Back at least.
We have a paper copy, but it's nice to see. We can wing it, be flexible.
Okay, here we go. This is yours down here. This one? There we go.
And you can just hit the down arrows. Should do it.
Good evening. Thank you for letting us address you this evening. My name is John Berry. I'm the interim executive director of the Fayetteville Housing Authority.
I forget, I need to speak into the microphone. I'm Kristen Bensinger. I'm the chair of the Fayetteville Housing Authority. So thank you for having us.
Welcome and thanks for coming.
So we thought we would start with the basic, what went out to people.
Oh, there it went. Okay. Well,
That's
let's just
just
do
a
this.
little, okay.
Okay, now you can do that. Okay, get the layer out. Just thinking. There. Okay.
Okay, great.
There you go.
So the first thing is the application. The application was a paper copy that people could pick up, people could print off. The application was also online, and people also had the ability to call into our office, and we had people on the phone that could help them fill out the application so we could take it that way. The application we're showing you here is in English, but we also had it available in Spanish and Marshallese, and worked with the Arkansas Coalition of the Marshallese to help facilitate that program from their constituents. So the other thing that we have available is we have multiple speakers in our office that are bilingual. And then we have a service that we use that is able to translate into 98 languages. We didn't have to use that, but we had it available because we wanted to make sure that anybody that called, we were able to help them. So when we started the application process, we had 1,062 applicants. 59 of those were just incomplete applications, just not even enough information for even us to call back on there. So the total applicants that were completed were 1,003, and then completed and eligible applicants were 645. So that meant that they met all the requirements for the program. They were able to provide the documentation, everything that they needed. Here's a little bit cleaner. You look at 1062 and the 1,003, and then the 645 that were in there that were able, qualified and ready to go. So there was question of incorporated versus unincorporated cities. 643 of the applicants lived within the incorporated city limits of Fayetteville, Farmington, Johnson, Lincoln, Prairie Grove, Springdale, West Fork, and Winslow. One of the things that we noticed was that it mirrored the size of the cities as well, right? Most of our applications came from Fayetteville. The second largest number of our applications came from Springdale. And you would think that in Washington County, that that's how it would play out, and it did. Disbursement by household. This is where we are. This is where we were last Thursday as far as distributing funds. We had distributed to 98 households, 15% of the budget. As you can see, we have 85% of that budget left to distribute. We have another 30 in the queue right now that we're finalizing that'll go out this week as well. So that number is ever changing. Part of the opportunity is we're actually having to call landlords and say, you know, if you'll certify that this person lives with you and send us a copy, we'll be able to go ahead and cut a check for you. And it's amazing the number of landlords that are saying, nah, it's not worth our time. And so we're surprised by that as well. So this kind of shows it that if you look at those, the number of households and the average spend of 4.14695 per household, the 98, we've spent $400,000 so far. We have another $893,000 that we'll be able to spend. So we continue working daily with those calls on that. And so that's a good thing as far as that. We could spend up to 10% on admin fees. Currently, we're only at 2%, and the largest part of that, as you can imagine, is labor. We had 6 full-time temporary people that were taking applications, helping people through the process. And then we now continue to have the people that are doing up those follow-up calls on applications, et cetera, to make sure that we have the information where we can get it out. Our plan is we don't believe that we will spend the 10% that's allocated to that, and that remaining money, then we'll be able to go ahead and pay even more rents. And so that's our plan for that money. If you look at our breakdown of administrative expenses, we had a software license where we could actually enter the people into the system, web design for $246. And that was, we set up a special web page that people could go online and fill out the applications on. And so, and then 19,000, almost 20,000 in labor for a total of 24,000 in expenses. One of the things that we're looking at that we may spend some of the additional administrative expenses on would be a system called Yardi, but we would look to direction from this group before we would make that purchase. If we thought that we were going to get additional funds to distribute, Yardi makes it even easier to distribute the funds. The thing that we like about it as well is there's a cap of a cost of 1%. So if we were to get an additional 1.5 million, the maximum expense to the system would be $15,000 on there. The nice thing about that system is it can actually do the checks for us. So we're not manually doing them in the office. And when I say manually, it's through a computer system, but it's still taking and loading the information in there. It allows for all the reports that Treasury requires. We'd be able to do the reports for you out of there as well. And so that's one of the things that we'll look later on as we get closer to spending our 75, 80% of that to try to get a feel from this group. If you think that you're going to want us to administrate more of the money, then we would look at getting that system. We'd want to make sure our team was trained on it, et cetera, so that we could hit the ground running, so to speak, on that. But it really only takes 7 to 10 days for them to get set up. 4 to 5 weeks, we'd be able to start making payments to people again out of any additional funds. So we're open for questions.
I have several, and I'll open it up, and then of course I'll let others.
Sure.
your materials were included in our agenda. Some of them are kind of hard to see tonight on the screen, but I hope the justices got those. I find the application interesting. Is that a template that you guys are using, or is that something that you've had to come up with yourself? The one thing I find interesting about it is it has, from the outside on looking, it has very little to do with COVID really on the application in my experience. So is that something that's put out by the government, or how are you guys?
We produced this, but we were able to, that's where the follow-up questions coming in and making sure that they're qualified, making sure that there was a COVID decrease in income, that it's provable. And that's part of the why you can't just distribute the money quickly, right? It's those follow-up phone calls and making sure that there's the certification of the decrease in their income.
So an applicant is at some point having to certify that their hardship, for lack of a better word, is due to the COVID pandemic.
Yes.
Or does everyone have to provide additional documentation to prove that, or is it, what's the steps there? Like some of them I'm seeing they have to supply utility bills, rental,
Right. Yeah, we asked for a copy of their lease thing from their complex of how much they're behind. We asked to see income, where the income's dropped. And one of the things that I failed to mention was also we don't let people double dip, so to speak. So if they're getting money from another source because of COVID, that's one of the screen catchers that keeps you going on from the process as well.
So the applicant would have to volunteer that double dip information though, right?
Well,
you don't have like a central system where you're checking with other agencies. Is that right?
We check our own agency.
Okay.
And people will, it's amazing the number of people that say, oh yeah, I'm getting help from, and then we say appreciate applying, but you're already getting this release. But we're able to check over 1,000 just in our database to make sure that they're not getting assistance from the Fayetteville Housing Authority.
Great. And if I ask you any questions tonight and you don't have the answers, don't,
Yep.
just follow up if you will. Send us
Yeah,
an
that's-
email to all
You
JPs.
bet. It's funny. That's kind of,
talked about
we
that.
talked about that. It's like,
Okay.
I'd much
Well,
rather say, I don't know, and I'll get back to
that's-
you on that.
Yeah,
than-
I just don't want you
Yep.
guys to feel like
Yep.
we're putting you on the spot in any means at all. Do you have any idea of what is the average processing time for a single application? I mean, I'm assuming that is dependent upon the applicant too, supplying the information, but what's your idea there? Do you have any sense of that?
So it's not only dependent on the applicant, it's just as dependent on the property manager. A lot of times the applicants will get the information into us. We opened it up in February. We were able to start cutting checks in March, but some of the 30 that are in waiting right now is the applicant has everything done on their side. We're waiting for the landlord to send the information, or the property manager, where we can go ahead and process that.
I'd have to say that's really disappointing. Is that a common challenge you guys are experiencing, that the landlord is not cooperating, or is that more of a one-off scenario?
There are several large groups that are not apparently participating in this program.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, if an applicant asks for assistance and the landlord is not cooperating, you can give the assistance directly to the applicant. Is that correct? After a certain amount of time and effort?
Yes. Yeah, and our first, because we want to be very good stewards of the money, the first thing is we try as many different ways as we can to get the information from the landlord. But yes, they can self-certify it.
Have you guys issued any assistance directly to the applicant as of yet? Do you know of?
Not that I'm aware of, but I can definitely check on that.
So, I don't mean this to be a criticism in any way, but I think this is very eye-opening for me that this is a pretty thorough and slow process. I mean, it just takes some time to turn these applications around, right? I mean, that's just, yeah.
We don't want to get crosshairs with the treasury.
Gotcha. All right, gotcha. So, I'm starting to think like, what is we've got a month or so of this under our belts. What does the future look like in terms of, do you think there was a glut of applications now and that these will level off a little bit? Are they plateaued right now? Do you have any sense of that, or is this just so new that we're not?
We're really not new, but we actually closed our applications because we knew the number of applicants that we had would far exceed the amount of money that we had.
Okay. And that's where you're at right now, is
Right.
processing this first round, if you will.
Right,
Okay.
yes. We know
Um,
that we know just based on, if you look at the average of 4,000 and the number of people that are waiting in the queue, that we will run out of money before we run out of qualified people.
Gotcha. If I'm understanding the process right, an applicant can request up to 12 months of assistance. Is that
Uh,
correct? Or is there a cap on the amount of assistance an applicant? can
We're only issuing 3 months.
Okay, so you're issuing assistance 3 months at a time to any applicants?
Yes.
Do you think the minority communities have responded to this offering?
Yes. Yes, I've got that chart. Sorry, it wasn't in your original packet, but yes. So we look at qualified applicants by race, and to do that, at least one member of the household must fall in that. 48% of the applicants were white. 21.98 did not identify. 18.63 were African American. 7% were Hawaiian Pacific Islanders. 3.21 were Native American or Alaskan. 0.76% Asian, and then 3.97% was other.
Thank you for that. That's extremely detailed and I appreciate that. And just to confirm, you guys will serve anybody anywhere in the county.
Yes. Yeah,
So
we,
my district out, District 5 out, Sonora, Nob Hill, all that, if they were to come to Fayetteville Housing and put their application in, they could be eligible for these funds. You're not specifically just helping Fayetteville.
Well, no. I mean, as I said in the presentation, a large percentage of our applicants are from Springdale, actually. And which makes sense because it's the second largest city. But yeah, there's a good distribution. I can't. We will send this to you, but it looks at the share of the population by municipality, the share of rental properties and the share of the applicants received. And you can see that the bars they follow pretty well. It's not surprising that the share of applicants, although Springdale is our second largest, it's not as many in that Springdale has its own program. But yeah, in general,
Well, and can I point out
Sure.
that this is unincorporated here
Right.
on the far left?
right.
That's unincorporated. And I will say one of the reasons, actually, you may want to explain
Okay.
since you're on the microphone about Yardy.
Yeah.
Why-
Well,
why-
yeah.
Yeah, he's on the microphone.
Yeah, so Yardi will allow us to look at that distribution even better to see where those are coming from. But I think one of the key things is making the application process as easy as possible, right? You can do it online, you can call us, you can, we worked with the Marshall Lees to their coalition to be able to gather the documents even. And so anything that we can do moving forward, any other outreach to groups, we'll also look at if we have more funds available.
Thank you. Thank you
Mhm.
so much. Questions from other members? JP Duncan?
So I just wanted to ask a question around the amount of funding. So you'd mentioned there's $4,100 that were distributed on average per household. And you said that's for 3 months of time, right?
Uh-huh.
So the average then is $1,392 per month, this average. Is that in line, you think, with, I guess, the rental rates within the county? I guess my question is, to say another way, is the rental reimbursement, is that also for utilities and other things, or is that exclusively for housing?
Just housing.
Okay, so just rent.
Right.
Okay. That seems a high, but I have not looked at apartments, but anyways, that's an interesting stat. And then of the 98 households, is there a potential there? Because you did mention that Springdale had received a number of applicants from there. We have, obviously, Springdale has, I think, Housing Authority here tonight as well. Is there a way to check against what they're distributing to make sure that there's no, as you said, double dip earlier, to
Right.
restate that
Yeah.
to ensure that that's not happening?
Yeah, yes, there is. And so we check to make sure. And that's part of the deal with the taking so long is we're calling agencies, we're doing different things to try to, we want the money to go as far as it can go with as many people as it possibly can do. And so, it looks like fraud to them. If they were to do that, they're committing fraud as well.
Sure.
And that's one of the things that you sign off on, is that the information you're providing, is accurate.
And then I found it really interesting, the comment around property managers and landlords not responding or saying it's not worth their time. Tell me more about that. I'm just wondering, if I own my home, but if I own property that I rented, I would obviously want to, I have a mortgage to pay on that, so I would want to collect rent. So what's some of the feedback you're getting from landlords?
That they just don't want to provide the information. They won't certify.
And no other follow-up around that? I mean,
Well, I mean, we're telling them, this is the amount that we could possibly reimburse you for, this amount of money. And they're like, yeah, no.
interesting. Okay. That baffles me, but thank you.
That's when our team told us that, we were like, what? I mean, why would, I can't think of any good reason why you wouldn't want, the assistance that is available there.
Sure. Thank you.
Other questions? JP Simons? JP Esri.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that you made the application available in multiple different languages, and thank you for the due diligence of doing that, as well as having staff on hand that are multilingual to help people fill out the application. What kind of education and promotion did you guys take on to get this out into those minority communities, or just the community at large, to make them aware that you have these capabilities to entice?
Right. There were press releases that went out, and our former executive director was on the radio and was interviewed by different groups. And we made sure that we were putting, whenever you went to the Fayetteville Housing Authority homepage, there was a direct link to take you to the website where you could actually do that. And, just letting our community members know that we were distributing it and that we could make it as easy as possible.
JP Esri.
Thank you. My question is there any kind of follow-up as far as a budgeting process or anything to keep? I realize a lot that what we're doing here is directly related to COVID, but is there anything going on to help people with the budget, help them figure out how they can make their payments, how they can take what they have and make it go further?
No, that is, the educational part was not part of that.
JP Washington.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for you. So you mentioned that there were some incomplete applications, and I think you said that there wasn't enough information to call back. Can you give some examples of the types of things that were missing from those applications?
I can't, but I'd be more than willing to get that information for you.
Okay, so my follow-up question is, you also mentioned that there are people that are, you have people on staff to help them complete the applications.
Mhm.
So do you have an idea of how many people actually utilize the help in completing the applications?
There were hours of people calling in. I can't give you the exact thing, but I look at their work log, and there for a couple of weeks, everybody was answering the phone, and being able to direct people or help people. And then we had the 6 full-time people for several weeks that's all they did, with using a special phone number that they could use their phone, but it was masked, and would go to them. And that's all they did day in, day out, with the exception of lunch, was answer calls and help people through the process. And if you came in to our office, we would we've got rooms there and we'd even take you in, if you wanted to do a paper copy, we would help you with that process.
Okay, thank you. My second question, I tried to jot down the percentages of applicants by race.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't hear a percentage for Hispanic, the Hispanic community. Are there any people in the Hispanic community that are applying? I have
Yeah.
48 and something percent white, 21.98 did not identify, 18.6 Black, Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders, Native Americans, Asian, and other. But I didn't hear a number for Hispanics. So I was just wondering.
Hispanic is an ethnicity tracked separately from race. This was by race, but we can get you the numbers, I believe, from Hispanic applicants.
Okay.
I just had a follow-up note. It said 6.8% of the applicants requested Spanish language contracts. So
That's all.
thank you.
Any other questions? I see several JPs in the gallery tonight. Do any of you have any questions for the Fayetteville Housing Authority? Justice Rios Stafford, if you'll come up, I think we can use this end seat right over here.
Thank you, JP Deacons. Oh, sit over here? Yeah. It's great to see the two of you again from the old days being on the board of the Housing Authority. Just had a few different questions. I know that kind of one thing that you didn't go into was the AMI limits that you have on who can apply. And if you could kind of, and I know most people don't know what AMI is, so maybe if you could just do a brief explanation of that and what the AMI limits that you've put on who can apply and why.
Yeah, anybody that was over 80% of the average monthly income was going to rent, they were disqualified over 80%. And it was 30, 50, and 80, but anybody over 80 for sure was disqualified. And we really tried to look at that 30 to 50% first.
Mhm.
And maybe just a general explanation of AMI, because this is our world. And
Right.
so you guys maybe, what
Yeah.
are these letters? What do they mean?
Right.
Do you mind to give a general explanation of what AMI is?
No, so.
We talk about this at every meeting.
Yeah. So you look at the amount of income basically that's going towards your home or whatever, and that should be at a certain percentage. And you want to make sure that it doesn't get so, back to your question about education and budgeting, that's where it really plays in. Do you have too much, are you renting too much house for the amount of income you have coming in?
And AMI stands for area median income, right?
Yes, sorry.
So you really tried to focus on the 30% to, or, well, really like 50% and below, it sounds like.
Yes, that was the majority of the people.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And do you have a sense of, when you say majority, do you have a sense of like 80%, 90% sort of fell into that category?
No, but I can get you that information.
Okay, sure. And then do you have a sense of, what projected date that you might have distributed enough money to reach that threshold where you might be in the position to come back and request more?
Yeah, probably by the end of April, beginning of May, we'll know what we have yet available and who we, it's the first ones were the easiest ones, right? The first 98 were the easiest because they had everything ready and thing. One thing to know that we didn't mention was it was a random pull system as well. Just because you were the first person that got it in, once we closed the applications, there were different things that were looked at, and then people were randomly chosen for that applicant pool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, once you do reach that threshold, say, for example, that instead of another 1.5 million, that you got the next round was 2 million or 2.5 million. What might you be able to do differently if you had a larger pool of money all at once?
Sure. Well, first thing we do is use the Yardi system where we weren't using Excel worksheets to try to get the information. But it would allow us then also to reach out to constituents in the community, community leaders from different groups and say, you need to help carry the message. So I think that would be one of the very first things that we would do is make sure that we reach out to community partners, whether it's I can't think of the group, but there's a group that meets the care. Do you remember?
Continuum
Yeah,
of
Continuum
care.
of Care, right? So you've got organizations there that are the Salvation Army. It's all types of different groups in the area that want to make sure that we try to keep people out of homelessness and make sure that we use those groups as well as other group leaders. You don't have to belong to that organization. We would do more outreach, I believe. This first round, we wanted to get it and get it out as quickly as possible because we knew people were hurting.
Do you think the AMI limits might change, or do you think you might, with either with the same a next round that's the same amount or a potentially larger amount, would you still focus on the same sort of AMI limits?
I think so, and I think that the number of applicants would also tell that story, right? If you suddenly see the number of applicants that fall into that 30 range be a very, very small percentage, then you would look at raising what that limit is to 50 or 70 or whatever.
And the agency's kind of able to do that based on its own judgment because the Treasury Department just says 80% or below, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So you're able to kind of,
Yeah.
you might be able to sort of adjust that on the fly.
Yeah.
Okay. And then in terms of like the percentage of admin fees, it looks like you guys have used a pretty small percentage of it so far. If you did if you had a bigger pool of money and did something more ambitious, like with Yardi or something like that, would the percentage that goes to admin fees be roughly the same, or would it be maybe a little more?
I think it would be just about the same in that the Yardi, whether it caps it right at 1%. So
Yeah.
That's kind of a good thing about that. We would engage people again, temporary workers to make and answer those calls, because I think that sometimes for people in our community, filling out an application on a computer is not the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah.
We do that day in and day out, right? We use computers, but that doesn't always happen, or they don't have the connectivity, right? And limiting the places that they can go. If it wasn't COVID, right, we would send people to the library to use all of the systems there. But when you have people that aren't as computer literate, having those people that are there to answer the phone and walk them through the process also provides value, I think.
For sure. Let me see here. If there's another same with that sort of same hypothetical, with a potentially larger pool of money, or with the next round, would you look at maybe potentially broadening it out beyond the folks, it's kind of capped at giving folks 3 months of assistance?
Yeah,
Is that
we
another
could
thing
we
to sort
could
of
look at depending on how much we have
Okay.
of what we would be able to do.
Yeah. Okay. And then let's see. Actually, you answered my question already about the educational aspects. And yeah, I just one more thing, because I think a lot of people don't know, wanted to clarify that it's not just this this specific rent relief program, but actually most of the FHA's programs, such as the vouchers and everything else, can be used throughout Washington County. Yeah.
The only place that we can't use vouchers are in Springdale.
In Springdale,
because they
right.
have their own housing authority. But yeah, we have people living in Prairie Grove that are on vouchers. We have people throughout, to your point, throughout Washington County, with the exception of Springdale, that could be on our voucher program.
Yeah. Okay. And then, just a final question. Is it possible that some of the folks who have, some of the property owners or property managers who've refused the money, is it possible that a reason that they're doing that is because they might be more inclined to evict the tenant than to take the money?
I don't know that that's an
that's
appropriate
not-
question. I think he's answered that question, that
Okay.
they're a little bit doubtful about
Yeah,
what the,
I don't want to ask you to
Okay.
speculate, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It would be picking out of the wind to try to do. that.
Gotcha. Okay, we just really don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. All right, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justice Rios Stafford. I want to say thank you and I appreciate you guys coming tonight. I welcome you to continue to share information with us via email and stuff, and I'm sure you're open to the justices asking you questions if that's,
Yeah,
that's fine. They'll just shoot you emails or whatever. Okay.
that's great.
Down the questions. and
Yeah, we'll get
share.
those.
Thank you
As
so
well.
much for taking the time this evening.
You bet. Thank you for having us and letting us kind of tell that story, right? Because people want to know where their money's going, and this helps.
Okay. Next up, do we have any representatives here from the Springdale Housing Authority? Okay. There was some information included in your packet. I welcome the justices to go over that. I'm sorry, there looks to be somebody on Zoom.
Ms. James.
No luck with Zoom tonight, huh? Okay. Ms. James, I hope you can hear us. We're having some technical difficulties, it looks like, with Zoom. We'll continue to work on it, but I do want to, I'm so sorry about this. I apologize to not be able to accommodate you this evening. I do want to give you the opportunity to speak to these justices. So if you wanted to come next month, we can do that. Or, I know you've included some information in your packet. I want some exchange between us. So I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry about that, but in the interest of time, I think we should move on. I think it's item number 9. Item number 9 is an ordinance appropriating $18,000 from the unappropriated reserves in the county library fund number 3008 to the dues and memberships line item in the county library budget for 2021. Do I have a motion for this ordinance? I have a motion to pass by JP Wilson,
Second.
second by JP Duncan. Any discussion? Any public comments? All right, we'll vote on this. We have a motion to pass by JP Wilson, second by JP Duncan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 10 is an ordinance reducing the amount of $399,367 from line items in various county budgets and restoring those funds to the unappropriated reserves and appropriating the total amount of $689,930 from the unappropriated reserves to various budget line items for 2020. This item and the next couple items are some cleanup ordinances that we have at the end of every year. If we have any questions about them, let's ask those of Comptroller Worthen. In the absence of that, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to pass item number 10.
We have a motion to pass by JP Duncan,
Second.
second by JP Simons. Any discussion? Any public comments? Seeing none, we have a motion to pass to the full quorum court by JP Duncan, a second by JP Simons. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Item number 11 is an ordinance adjusting carryover revenues and various funds for 2021. Do I have a motion on this ordinance?
So moved.
A motion by JP Duncan. Second by JP Johnson. Any discussion? Any public comments? Seeing none. We have a motion by JP Duncan to pass the full quorum court, second by JP Johnson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Item number 12, an ordinance deappropriating surplus amounts from the full-time salaries for various departments and restoring those amounts to the unappropriated reserves as required by the 2021 budget controls for the first quarter of 2021. As many of you are probably familiar, we have a sweep ordinance for unused salaries and wages in all the personnel accounts. And every quarter, any unused dollars, we sweep back into the unappropriated reserve. Do I have a motion for this ordinance? We have a motion to pass the full quorum court by JP Simons,
Second.
second by JP Wilson. Any discussion? Any public comments? We have a motion to pass the full quorum court by JP Simons, second by JP Wilson. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. Item number 13, an ordinance appropriating $332,206.34 from the Coronavirus Relief Fund to various line items in the Buildings and Grounds budget for 2021. As you can see written in this ordinance, the Buildings and Grounds is requesting some funds to basically update some of our systems for a post-COVID world. These include touchless bathroom fixtures. They're going to start some remodifications for one of the circuit court rooms. And they're also going to install bipolar ionizers in all of our county buildings. I want to add something to this. I've reached out to the circuit court judges and want to make sure that they know that we're here to appropriate funds as needed. I think they appreciate that, but they also say that while they have limited guidance right now, further guidance is going to come out at the end of this month from the Supreme Court about how they're to conduct their operations. So I consider this an initial expenditure that we'll probably have more of in the future. Do I have a motion with this ordinance? I have a motion to pass by JP Wilson, second by JP Johnson. Discussion? JP Washington.
Thank you. I have a few questions. So I see that the recommendation is to install the needlepoint bipolar ionizers. And I'm just curious if we looked at any other filtration systems, why was this particular technology chosen? Because when I read up on it and I did look at the safety data, but it appears that there is nothing that has really been established in a real world situation, that these were all in a laboratory type setting. So my question to the court or to whoever knows the answer is, why did we choose the bipolar ionizers as opposed to any other filtration system? That's one question.
That's a valid question. We don't have anybody from Buildings and Grounds on the call this evening, do we? Or anybody on the call that would like to speak to this? It might not work anyway.
So I guess that my ask would be, because I also read that it can generate ozone and there are other safety issues. So I just think that before we move any further with this, that we would want to have those things answered as to why this particular technology was chosen over another one.
Great.
And the second question that I had, I guess that kind of goes along with that, is were these recommendations that or mandates by the federal government? Were they recommendations by the CDC? Are these personal preferences of the county as to the upgrades?
I have no knowledge about the ionizers or the touchless fixtures, whether those are CDC required or recommended. I do know that the retrofit of the circuit court room is based on CDC guidelines and then also guidelines that I believe they're getting from the state.
Okay. And Also, is this going to be a complete renovation based on all of the updates that have to be done?
No, I think I'm being specific, and I think the word retrofit is they're trying to utilize the space and most of what's there to accommodate separation and distancing, much like we're experiencing tonight.
Okay. And were there bids?
I'm not
For
aware
this
of any.
one?
I don't know one way or the other about that.
Well, those were the questions that I had.
Thank you. JP Madison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was also very curious about whether bids were let, but because these are pretty significant amounts. So I was very concerned about whether these were bid. I was also, I thought with the Johnson Controls contract that we had a lot of updates to our plumbing fixtures. So I was really confused about how we're now updating plumbing fixtures again. That seemed like a question that we ought to have answered. And then as an attorney who practices in Washington County Circuit Court on occasion, I was concerned about why we're making a plan for a single courtroom when the other judges have not even been able to get assistance in getting their courtrooms worked out. I know Judge Warren has been trying to get some plexiglass in her courtroom to be able to hold juvenile hearings and has not been able to do it. And it seems like we've gone out of our way to help a single judge. And that seems unusual when we have 8. If $88,000 is what it's going to cost for a single courtroom, I think we ought to be stepping back and saying, gosh, are we going to really spend $88,000 on every single courtroom? Or is there a way to work it where, like, for instance, the historic courtroom is very, very large. And Judge Beaumont typically does not have jury trials in that courtroom. She mostly needs the space when she has drug court. And so it occurred to me that a cost savings measure might be to share courtrooms temporarily. And it did, I think Justice Washington was mentioning this. It sure seems like we are going to demolish what's in that courtroom, ripping out carpet, ripping out jury bars, ripping out the jury platform to redo it, when it kind of concerned me, like, so is that going to work in a year when hopefully things are more normal? And then lastly, my understanding is that the Supreme Court of Arkansas is expected to issue an updated per curiam opinion any day now with new guidance. And I think, for instance, I don't even think the current Supreme Court per curiam opinion takes into account the 3-foot revision from CDC down from 6 feet. And so I'm just really reluctant to commit, a high five-figure sum to retrofit a courtroom dramatically when we're not, it doesn't seem like we're operating on the latest guidance. I know there's some concern that the Supreme Court it's not that the court has directed that jury trials resume May 1st, so much as they have extended the suspension of jury trials through April 30th. And so it could very well be that there's significant limits on jury trials in May. It's not like suddenly May 1 and all the juries are going to be back. It's still going to be very moderate. And so before we spend $88,000 to redo a single courtroom, I think this court ought to know what the renovations look like for all 8 circuit courts. And then what the current Supreme Court guidance is going to be. And I think we don't have that right now. From speaking to one of the judges, they expected the per curiam even last Friday. And I was updating my phone just today to see if maybe it had come out today. It could likely be out before we meet next Thursday. So overall, looking at this, I want to do things, and I want to install touchless fixtures. I just don't know why that wasn't sort of part of what we already did with Johnson Controls. So I just think there needs to be a lot more questions answered about this expenditure. And I think we need to have the benefit of hearing from all of our judges and not just one, because we have 8 divisions, and several of them hear criminal cases, and will be needing to have jury trials resume as soon as they can for constitutional reasons. But I worry about totally demolishing a single courtroom and then in a year or two being asked to sort of put it back. And that seems unnecessary. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. couple things. You know, I invite all JPs to follow up on these questions when they get to the agenda. There's a lot of this that I'm entrusting to the elected officials and staff to making the best decisions that's within their purview. Secondly, I don't want anybody to characterize that one judge is being shown favoritism and the other one's being ignored. I don't know about every interaction that every circuit court judge has had with Judge Wood's staff or county employees, but I will say I reached out to each personally, and I believe that this circuit courtroom is being considered now because this circuit courtroom has submitted their request. JP Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Robert Dennis, JP number 10, Farmington, just for the record. One thing I would ask, and I would ask this of all committees, if you could, anytime you have someone speaking, if you'll have them speak in the speaker, it's very, very difficult to hear in the back here. Fact is, what I did was called in and I'm zoomed in, and I listen to it that way, and anything that comes over the speaker, I hear. If it doesn't come over the speaker, if I do that and talk to you, you don't hear it. So it's just a small technicality, but if you're at home listening, you won't hear it unless it's on the speaker system. So wanted to mention that. Also, since I represent District 10, I had a constituent know more about this than what I knew about it. And they said, would you please ask about the bid process on the air conditioning? Because he understood and showed me in writing where there was not a bid process, and that it was that we're even going to pay the fees for the person or for the company that's getting the bid process, winning the bid on air conditioning. And so that seemed very strange to me that we would pay 5% of what the cost towards, I'm sorry, getting feedback, that we would pay 5%. That should be that person's cost, not our cost, to be in the bid process. And so it really raised a question with me, and I've just not got an answer yet. And so I'm saying it to y'all that I'm concerned, and I just want it done correctly. And as long as it's done correctly, that's fine. But for my constituent to bring it to me already means that the public knows more about it than I do, and apparently more than we do. And so I just wanted to mention that. I'm not pounding my fist or saying I'm not for it, or that I am against, that I am against it or anything like that. I just wanted to bring that to attention because I promised him I would. Thank you.
Thank you, JP Dennis. JP Johnson.
Yes, thank you. I second JP Dennis's motion on people speaking into the speakers when they talk. And the second thing, I was disturbed about the bids as you were when I first read this. And then I gave some thought to the climate in the construction industry in Northwest Arkansas. And if we can get somebody that wants to do the work, and those weren't bids that were submitted, those were proposals to do the work. But I know for somebody, if somebody called me today and said they were taking competitive bids on building a custom home, my answer would be, I'm not interested. So I think if the work's got to be done and we've got contractors that are willing to submit proposals and do it, we better accept the proposals. And I don't like it, but that's the reality of the environment we're in today.
Well, thank you. And I do understand that. Can you tell me anything about the 5% that we will pay?
No, that's the way I read it. The man submitted to do a proposal at cost plus 25% is the way I read it. That's his proposal.
Okay, well, I'll investigate more on my end, and I would recommend that y'all do the same, because that could leave a real black mark on us for doing something like that that we don't know about. Thank you.
JP Pond.
Sometimes I miss out a little bit. I sat up closer to the front this time, but still yet, I gotta ask, and I'm gonna ask you, Mr. Chairman, for a point of clarification. What courtroom were someone referring to that's gonna be totally demolished and rebuilt? If
I
you-
have no knowledge of a courtroom going to be completely demolished and
Okay,
rebuilt.
well, I feel a little better about that because there are probably people watching this that would be very upset about any courtroom being totally demolished. And I just was curious as to which one that was going to be. Hopefully, it's not going to be the one at the historical courthouse. But anyway.
No,
thank
sir.
you.
These, my understanding are these expenditures are for Judge Lindsay's courtroom.
And I kind of got an idea on one thing there. When we had some restroom fixtures installed by Johnson Controls, they installed fixtures for efficiency and probably, cost efficient, the initial cost. And they probably didn't at the time know we were going to have a COVID issue going on. Didn't realize the new kind of needs we have this day and time, and who knows how long in the future we're going to have these needs. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Couple things I would remind everybody that it's our duty as the quorum court to appropriate the funds. It's within the judge's purview to expend those funds responsibly, and I don't think I have any doubt about that. Secondly, I'm still inclined to pass this to the full quorum court for consideration next week, and I invite all the justices to follow up on these questions that they have for some clarification. I think it's pertinent that we try to get these funds expended with the emergency that's going on and the timing that we're dealing with. So I believe I had a motion to pass by JP Wilson and a motion to second by JP Simons. Is that correct? We've talked long enough. I might have forgotten. So any public comment?
Questions about proposals that come before this committee should be answered in public. It shouldn't be incumbent upon individual JPs to call on individuals around the county to research each ordinance. It should be this body that vets the proposals. And so to suggest that the vetting should occur in private without the public's benefit of knowing is really kind of shocking. I'm surprised that there wasn't someone here to be able to answer questions on such costly, extensive proposals tonight. And so I would ask this body to make sure that questions about proposals that you all are voting on are vetted openly in public, and that you ensure that the people that can answer questions about the proposals are here to answer them in public when the people have the questions. Thank you.
Any additional public comments?
Beth Koger, Fayetteville. I'm here tonight, and I know JP Johnson, he makes a living building, and I respect what he said, but as a taxpayer of Washington County, I'm having some electrical work done in my home. And I've gotten 3 estimates on that because I want to save money, my money. So before this goes forward, I would urge everyone to explore and answer these questions. And especially I'm concerned about a question that JP Washington raised about the ionizers, because she mentioned ozone. And that's a very serious matter, for health reasons. So I would urge you to get answers to those questions before this goes on to the full court, because that's next week, and I'm not sure we can get all those answers before next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more public comments? JP Washington.
I move that we table this until our next Budget and Finance meeting in May, so that we can get these questions that have been asked tonight answered in the spirit of transparency, so that the public will know the information that we as JPs find out as well.
I have a motion to table by JP Washington, a second by JP Simons. Ms. Patty, will you call a roll for this, please? Well, any discussion on it? Ms. Patty, will you please call a roll for this?
Lance Johnson. Sean Simons. Bill Usry. Sam Duncan.
No.
Chandra Washington.
Yes.
Jim Wilson. 3 for, 3 against.
3 for, 3 against. Okay, so that motion fails.
It's tied.
It still fails, though. Did you have a public comment online?
Yes, Sarah Moore.
Okay.
We can try.
Hello, can you hear me?
We got you, Ms. Moore. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Hi, Sarah Moore, Fayetteville. I wanted to reiterate some of the comments, and also I wanted to kind of ask a question that I hope that the court would maybe have conversation about. I know we just comment, you don't always respond, but I think this is incredibly important. I did notice that the funds that we're talking about were listed under professional services, and under professional services, they have different rules and how we can spend those funds. But like many folks have mentioned tonight, feeling like it was important that we do get bids on purchasing for the county. Anything that is $25,000 or more in the county on a purchase has to actually go through a competitive bid process. And I wouldn't know why a project of this magnitude with this amount of spending, why we wouldn't consider taking that through purchasing. Much like Ms. Koger spoke about, many of us, always are trying to stretch our dollar and budget as much as possible. And so I understand right now that business is booming. However, I would hope that we at least would take the opportunity over a week or 2 week period to actually put this out into the public to see if anyone is possibly interested in this business as well. So I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Any other public comments? All right, back to the original motion. We have a motion to pass the full quorum court by JP Wilson, a second by JP Simon. Ms. Patty, will you please do a roll?
Lance Johnson. Sean Simons. Bill Usry.
No.
Sam Duncan.
Yes.
Chandra Washington.
No.
Jim Wilson.
Yes.
Chair votes in favor. Motion passes. Item number 14 is an ordinance appropriating $219,000 from the Coronavirus Relief Fund to the other professional services line item in Circuit Court 6 budget. This is an ordinance to pass some funding for Returning Home Incorporated. This has been through the Jails Committee. I want to reiterate some comments I made last night. I appreciate Executive Director Nick Robbins. He's made a lot of inroads within the county. He's built a lot of trust. He's a member of our Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee. I think, he's shown a lot of patience with us as we've learned a lot about his organization. And I will from here let him take it, give you guys kind of a summary of what this is about, and then you guys will have an opportunity to ask him questions. Mr. Robbins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At Returning Home, we work with men and women coming from incarceration, and we're located in Springdale at 703 North Thompson. Inside our location, we're a one-stop shop. So we partner with a lot of different organizations and agencies to provide services to be most effective for the client base that we have. In our building, we have the largest transitional facility in the state of Arkansas, 67 beds for men only directly from prison. We also have therapists on site. We have a parole officer that offices in our building, oversees our client base. We got Goodwill that offers all job services, clothing closet. We got a food bank there and a lot of different services that we offer. Our goal for these resources would be for a new program. It's called the Community Alternative Program. And what that will do is that would provide a sentencing alternative for Washington County judges that are working with individuals that are on probation that violate their supervision of parole without committing a crime that would send them to prison. So you'd think typically they wouldn't go to prison if they didn't commit a crime that would send them to prison. In the state of Arkansas, 45% of the people, on average, 7,500 people a year go to prison for supervision violations, not for new charges. So half of the prison system currently is in prison for not committing a charge, but instead not following supervision. So what that looks like is they didn't show up to appointment, they failed the drug test, they didn't complete a program this was complete. They may have not been up on their fines and fees. What we see as Returning Home is that's a life struggle, and that's what we do best, is come alongside individuals. We know our population, there's some unique factors. 79% of them have experienced physical or sexual trauma by the age of 12. 54% have a significant mental illness where they have to take medication and then been diagnosed by a therapist. And then on average, they're at a 6th grade reading and writing level. So when you have all of those life struggles, it leads to typically drug use, and on 80% rate, our client base are addicts. And then that leads them to struggle with the basic parameters of life. And then when you get put on supervision, things get real interesting and really difficult. So what we like to do is come alongside those individuals, and the people that we work with are higher risk, so most likely to go back. And we've had a very good success with those individuals over the last 4 years. And what this would do is this is taking an individual that's on probation that has not went to prison and say, instead of sentencing you to prison, we're going to send you to Returning Home for 90 days. You're going to live with them. You're going to be taking random drug tests. You're going to be taking trauma-informed counseling. You're going to be fed. You're going to be having classes every single night. You have case management. You have med management. We have staff there 24 hours a day. We will get you employment within the first week of you arriving. Over the pandemic, we had 100% employment for everybody that was not on disability. We are very efficient at what we do. Our crew that we've assembled over the years is very good at coming alongside somebody, because we do this every single day. And so this money, the $219,000, would provide a pilot project at 10 beds that the county judges and probation officers will be able to fill. So we'll set aside those beds, and whenever they say, hey, we've got somebody, we'll go and interview them to make sure it's a good fit, bring them into our program, and work with the judicial system as they progress over the 90 days. We piloted it with one individual. That individual showed up, and they expressed to us that he wasn't going to make it. And he did show up on 3 different types of drugs. From that point, working with him, he just completed the program this week. So he went 90 days, passed every single drug test. He worked, he paid child support, everything that the court asked of him, he met those standards, and everybody that had worked with him in the past was very shocked. So again, we have the knowledge and the skill base, and when we look at the jail system that is ever growing, we need to start funding something different. We can't just say we want something to be done differently and we want somebody to do it for free. At some point, we have to show where our heart is, and our checkbook shows that. So if $219,000 from the COVID fund can do that, can be able to give us an opportunity a year later to lay in front of you the statistics of success that we believe is going to happen. We appreciate the opportunity to do that. And just to know that we will not be asking additional funds for this program going forward. We'll actually work with the different cities to get them to fund it going forward if they want to sign up for the program. I've already talked to one city. They're excited about the opportunity and putting in their regular budget, and they do want to sign up for the program. So we believe once they see that we are investing in their people that are in their community to keep them in their community, instead of putting them in a place that does not bring about change, but instead just furthers reincarceration and criminal behavior and ultimately harm to our community, that other cities will jump on board as well. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. Any questions from the board? JP Johnson?
Yeah, I don't have a question, and I don't want to repeat the conversation we had in the last night, but I just want everybody to know I had my first conversation with Mr. Robbins 2 years ago, and we've had an ongoing conversation, and I'm 100% in favor of this program.
JP Duncan?
I've had the chance to go out and see the returning home center, and it's unbelievable the work that is done there by Mr. Robbins and his team. I just will also be voting in favor, and want to encourage fellow JPs, if you haven't had the chance, set up some time and go out and tour the returning home center. Unbelievable work. Recidivism rate, last time I checked in the state of Arkansas, is something like 56%. That means someone is going to return, be reincarcerated, I think was within 5 years of originally being incarcerated. I believe that he's going to make a dent in that here in Northwest Arkansas. Program is incredible. We've got people who are actually working and being taught life functions that they're not learning other places. So again, encourage you to get out there, and very much in favor of the work you do. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? JP Washington?
Thank you. So my question is, how does this fall under the professional services line item in the Circuit Court 6 budget?
What I have been told is that is just strictly an accounting function. It'll be basically a clearing account because we need somewhere to place the funds to issue them to Mr. Robbins' organization. So professional services was picked because this is somewhat of a professional service, and the Circuit Court 6 budget was picked because that is solely a criminal courts budget, and legally we thought that was the most appropriate place.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think I need a motion. I have a motion to pass on to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation by JP Johnson,
Second.
second by JP Duncan. Any discussion from the JPs? Any JPs in the gallery? Public comments? Thank you, Mr. Robbins. We're going to kick you off your seat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kyle Smith, 2801 Dove Drive, Fayetteville. This sounds like a fantastic program. I'm in favor of anything that's going to reduce crime as opposed to just putting people in jail for it. My concern is with the construction of the ordinance, and this is as a member of the public who's a big fan of transparency and certainty in where the public money's going. And maybe this is convention here and I'm just not familiar with it, but all of the whereases in your ordinance describe a fantastic program. And then when you get to the now therefore, we put money in a budget item, but we don't say what it has to be used for. And that's an awful lot of money for professional services without having some certainty about that it's going to be spent on the professional services we've discussed. I think it would be appropriate to have an additional clause in there that restricts the funds to the use that you're specifying. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Additional public comments? I have a motion on the floor by JP Johnson to pass the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation, a second by JP Duncan. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Item number 15 is a CARES Act funding discussion with regard to Judge Wood's statement. This was put on the agenda at the request of JP Chandra Washington, so I'll hand it off to her. JP Washington.
Thank you. So I'm sure that by now we've all seen the press release that was released by Judge Wood. And he summarized it earlier in the meeting that a portion of the CARES Act money be set aside as a matching grant for the smaller municipalities in Washington County. And so I wanted to have this added to the agenda so that we could have an open and public conversation about it. We've been talking about this CARES Act reimbursement money since, I don't even remember, November, December of last year. And there has been a lot of debate. There's been a lot of concern. And when I looked at what Judge Wood presented, I think that this would be an appropriate compromise for those who want to spend all of the money versus those who want to spend none of the money. And I just have to say that I don't know what an appropriate amount of money would be. We've heard the concerns that some of this money should be set aside, well, that it should be set aside for a rainy day. We've also heard other things that we need to do with this. And I just believe that at some point, I don't know if it's really about the money, because we just a few minutes ago passed an ordinance to go to the full quorum court to allocate $219,000 of this CARES Act money. So my question to the body is, what is an appropriate amount of money? If we are willing to transfer $219,000 to the professional services fund for returning home, then what amount of money would be appropriate for us to help our neighbors in Washington County who need help? So that was the reason that I wanted this on the agenda tonight, so that we could have an open and that we could have a public discourse and conversation about that.
Do I have any discussion? JP Wilson.
We've heard tonight that we're going to receive approximately $23 million this year and probably another $23 million next year. And the impression that I have is that there will be significant strings attached to that. In all likelihood, it's going to relate to the kind of things that have been discussed about the CARES Act funding. So I'm inclined to want to, and also I think that the full court last time made a decision to move forward, not taking or not setting that money aside for benevolence type things at this time. I believe that between the 7 million that we already have on hand and have spent a significant amount of it, but still have a good portion left, and the 26 million that we're going to receive, that there is not a imminent need to put this into that pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you, JP Wilson. Discussion? Any JPs in the gallery want to just, oh, I'm sorry, JP Simons.
Thank you, Chair. I was encouraged by Judge Wood's announcement and press release on this. I feel like it checked a lot of the boxes of my concerns, wanting to use the money, also wanting to use it in a collaborative way. I think this puts a lot of onus on our municipalities who are probably more in touch with the needs in their own specific communities to find what those emergencies are, come to the quorum court and work collaboratively with us. I don't have an answer for JP Washington on what an appropriate amount is. I think that should probably be driven by those municipalities, but I like this idea. I think that it is a true compromise and it is a good use of some of those funds. My thoughts.
Thank you, JP Simon. Any further discussion by the committee? JP Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I met with the judge last week with Pastor Clint Schneckloff to talk about this. And one of the things, well, we both thanked the judge very much for bringing forth a proposal that offered a middle ground to try to find a solution for what seems to be an ongoing impasse. The issues that we talked about with Judge Wood were that there was no attempt on his part or his office's part to talk to the cities in advance of this. You all criticized me when the chamber proposal came about for small business grants, saying that I didn't talk to all the chambers. We had talked to the city of Fayetteville's chamber, and they were interested. But here we put out a proposal about partnering with the cities for grants without talking to the cities. And the cities have mostly spent their CARES money already. And so they don't have the funds to do the matching part of what Judge Wood has proposed. The second issue is all of us have some part of a city in our district. My district is entirely within the city of Fayetteville. And to me, it strikes me that we're asking those folks in my district to pay twice, because the money that came to Washington County came for every citizen in the county. And then the money that came to the city of Fayetteville came for everyone within the city. But to make this proposal work, the folks in my district would essentially be asking to pay twice to fulfill the same purpose. And I'm also concerned, there've been a lot of questions about people who live outside of the city limits and what that means for them if they don't have a city to partner with. This debate is not going to go away. My understanding is that the 20 million, 40 million, or whatever that's coming from the American Rescue Plan, it's not here yet. We don't know how much we're going to get. Treasury is still working on what the strings will be. And the concern is that it's great to say we can wait on that, but nobody can tell any of us when it's going to be here and how we'll be able to use it. And there is a need right now. We heard it from the folks of the Fayetteville Housing Authority. There's a need right now in our community. They're just addressing housing. And for us to sit here when Judge Wood says, the executive branch leader of Washington County says, it would be a good compromise to use part of this money in our community. And I think it's incumbent upon us in this body to act in some way and to do it now, because the need is now. But we have to do it in a way that works. And it's great to say, let's partner with our cities, but if they don't have the money to do it, then it goes nowhere. And that's just an empty message. And so we're going to continue to hear from the public about this. And I think we need to figure out a solution. And I applaud Judge Wood for stepping forward with a proposal. And you all didn't like mine, so where's yours? Thanks.
JP Hires.
Thank you. I just want a question that's been come up from the public multiple times. And we've brought up several times here in a meeting, but nothing has come about this, is why have we not tried to form a committee to try to figure out what to do with this money? We have been asked over and over and over again to put together a committee based on the membership to work on solutions to this instead of just bringing it up randomly at meetings. That's all. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Item number 16 is our public comment period. This is a 12-minute comment period with a 3-minute limit per person. I would ask when speakers come to the podium, they please give their name and where they live. Public comments.
Beth Koger, Fayetteville, Arkansas. I just want to mention some of the things that was just brought up, but as far as I appreciate what you all are trying to do. I know it's not an easy job, and I appreciate that Judge Wood came forward with the proposal that he did. But the fact that he hasn't heard from the cities, unless I misunderstood what he said, I mean, that kind of points to this being kind of dead in the water. We have people in the community who need help. And I think it is an imminent need when we have hungry children and we have people worrying about whether or not they're going to have a roof over their head at the end of this month. So this money has been here since November 25th. And I think this would be, I mean, JP Washington asked for a discussion, but I really didn't hear much of a discussion from you all, and you're the ones who have to make those decisions. Thank you.
More public comments.
Josh Moody, Fayetteville. I want to thank JP Madison for starting this conversation in the previous months. I want to thank Judge Wood for continuing the conversation. I want to thank JP Washington for bringing it up again tonight. At the beginning of this meeting, I heard Treasurer Hill say that there was an anomaly in the 2020 budget because there was a significant amount of revenue over expenses. And he named that the CARES Act, the CARES Fund, this money that we're talking about right now, is the reason for that. And I heard last month that it makes no sense for the county to profit off of a pandemic. I think that makes sense. I know that we've used some of the money already. I know of $200,000 or roughly on body scanners at the jail. I know of, it looks like tonight we're looking to spend another $550. So that's $750. So far, so that leaves about $3.7. I can understand if we don't want to spend $3.6 like was suggested before. I don't understand why it makes any sense not to use any of it for the betterment of the community. JP Wilson tonight said he was inclined, and then he also mentioned the 23 million coming. He said those have significant strings attached potentially. This does not. So why wait for that when we don't know if we can use it for this, when we know we can use this money now and it's needed? Don't spend 3.6, spend 2, spend 1.5, spend something. Let's, again, like Judge Wood suggested last week, let's compromise. I feel like the conversation keeps getting shut down when we're all here to serve, not just sit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Any more public comments?
JP Deacons, we have Sarah Moore.
Ms. Moore, can you hear us?
Yes. Hi, Sarah Moore, Fayetteville. Thank you for the discussion tonight around the CARES money. And I agree with what's been said, and I won't say verbatim kind of what was spoken before, but I'm really appreciative of all the different ideas that have come forward. It feels like maybe we're picking up some momentum to land somewhere. But tonight we didn't really evolve into much of anything after this was put on as a discussion item. And so I guess that would be my challenge to my elected officials sitting here and of the full quorum court is, you know, what is the next step that we need to achieve for these funds? We've heard so many different things beside, you know, of the rainy day hasn't come, things can come up in the future. One of the things I think that Benton County, I believe that they're doing is that they have formed a committee to really look at this. And maybe we need to have a sharper focus on these funds, because maybe we need to practice with these funds, because when the larger funds come down the pipe, we could be prepared with what our process is going to look like and how we're going to evaluate and use those funds and spend those in our county. So I'd like to ask all of you to please really consider and have some greater discussion about whether or not a formation. I know we don't all want one more meeting or one more committee. However, I think these dollars are incredibly important and they could be very impactful. They are our tax dollars, after all, that have come back to our county. And so I think that they deserve to have that level of care and scrutiny and focus so that we can really take care of Washington County. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Public comment.
JP Deacons, we have Sherry Main.
Ms. Main, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead. Please state your name and where you're from.
Thank you. Sherry Main, Fayetteville, Arkansas. And I don't want to repeat what's been said, but I do have a couple of thoughts on what I've heard from tonight's meeting and the discussion of Judge Wood public statement that he made. And I do thank him for that. It is a step in the right direction. It may not be the correct step, but it is a step, and that's the important thing to take from it. But I wanted to just say that the Fayetteville Housing Authority supplies a rent need, and that's a limit of 3 months to catch up possibly for some of these individuals, but it is it may not even catch them up. They may be 6 months behind. We don't know the situation for each family and each individual that have applied. We just know the limitations that the Fayetteville Housing told us that they offer, which was 3 months. So they may still be in arrears. They may have fines and penalties that are due as well. That may be why a lot of the landlords do not want to take the payment, because they have fines and penalties attached to them that they cannot include in that payment. So that's something else to consider. And the utilities, they're not included in that. There's no help for utilities. And most of them are in arrears. They're playing catch up. Both electric and water companies have stopped the holds on shutoffs. So we'll be seeing more people without running water and electric in their homes. And I think the help will come a little too late for most of these people if we wait on the next funding from the federal government. If and when that does come, it's going to be a little too late, and people are going to be homeless on the street with children and hungry. And I know none of you and none of the JPs want that. It's sad to see homeless people. Another idea would be, I agree, to form a committee for the CARES funding and charge that committee with the task. So it can't be a public discussion for the whole quorum court or a committee. So let's charge a committee and appoint that committee to discuss it and come out with ideas that can be used, not only for this funding, but for future funding. The same problems are going to exist. They're not going away. So that will already be in place for the next funding, when and if it gets here and how much it is. So I just thank you for listening to me with my comments tonight. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Main. Mr. Robbins?
Each of the cities, the 2 cities, they have these resources. They fall under the community block grant. So how you find out what's permissible to be used is the same process they do under the block grant. So with each of our cities, the main ones, we have like one staff member that oversees the entire program. So if you guys did want to contact literally 2 people, they could explain how they've already utilized their money. Within the last 30 days, they've given out their last round. And I can speak to Springdale just because it help out with that. Is that it's Marshallese community. It's everything that's focused on housing, food, and employment, because those are the categories of the block grant. And so possibly, and I don't know if this is how it would work, but you'd say, hey, we would be willing to match those areas that you funded, because the money's not there for them anymore. Because one thing with the cities, because again, there's a staff member that's already geared up, everything's done before the money even arrives. Because they've got a really long process of all the stuff they have to submit to document how they're utilizing that funds, is just to reach out to them and consider that. Right now for Springdale is like $405,000. And then I think Fayetteville is a little more. So it'd be less than $1 million to match what the city's done, and they invested in the nonprofits that are then giving out money for housing and food and all kinds of other assistance. So.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. Any more public comments? We have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
I'll make it quick. Evelyn Rios, Stafford, Fayetteville. In terms of just forming a committee, we've heard a lot about that tonight in public comment. Is it possible for us to form something other than a committee of JPs? For example, something like, and I wasn't around for this when the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee got formed. That's a committee that includes the quorum court. It includes other departments within the county. I still kind of have questions around this. Can we even form a committee that also includes representatives from like outside agencies like the Continuum of Care that we just heard about, and things like that, to sort of work on a more of a countywide solution that includes governmental and non-governmental representatives as well. So just sort of kind of putting that out there as an idea, and seeing something like that. And then just my other comment in terms of the CDBG money, I think that's actually a really great idea. Unfortunately, a lot of smaller cities in our county don't get CDBG money. It's mostly, I think, Fayetteville and Springdale. So we would need to, and I'm all in favor of doing something matching for them, but we need to figure out some sort of different solution so we don't leave our smaller cities out. Thanks.
Thank you. Public comment has expired. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.